SCP-106. Let me tell you about the Foundation's classification system first, because you'll need to understand what Keter means. Safe means it stays put. Euclid means it's unpredictable. Keter? Keter means we're barely keeping it contained, and it could end the world if we screw up. SCP-106 is Keter class, and here's why. He's a humanoid entity that appears as an elderly, heavily decomposed man. But decomposed doesn't capture it. His flesh is actively rotting, dripping a black substance that corrodes everything it touches. Steel, concrete, human tissue, doesn't matter. The corrosion spreads at roughly 1 centimeter per minute until the substance is completely dissolved. But the real nightmare? 106 can phase through solid matter at will. Walls, floors, ceilings, none of it stops him. When he grabs you and his touch causes immediate tissue decay, you don't just die. You get pulled into his personal pocket dimension. The Foundation has recordings from that place. Screams that echo for hours before cutting to silence. Their containment strategy is brutal but effective. When 106 breaches containment, they use what's called the femur breaker protocol. They break a D-class personnel's femur bone, and the screams of agony actually lure 106 back to his cell. The Foundation literally tortures people to contain this thing. Think about what that says about how dangerous he really is. SCP-239. This one's going to disturb you on a different level entirely. SCP-239 is an 8-year-old girl with Class 9 reality-bending abilities. In simple terms, she can change reality just by thinking about it. Not illusions, not tricks, actual fundamental alterations to how physics works. She once made gravity stop working in a 50-meter radius because she thought it would be fun to float. Here's how they contain her. Medical coma. They keep an 8-year-old child permanently unconscious because when she's awake, her subconscious desires reshape the world around her. She's classified as Keter not because she's malicious, she's just a kid, but because children don't understand consequences. The Foundation has documented her creating matter from nothing, altering the behavior of fundamental forces, and even bringing drawings to life. One incident report describes her unconsciously manifesting a pet that had characteristics of multiple animals and human intelligence. The thing had to be terminated after it started asking researchers why it existed. The ethical implications are staggering. They're chemically suppressing a child to prevent reality from becoming too unstable. But what happens when the drugs stop working? What happens when she grows up? The Foundation doesn't have answers, and that terrifies them more than most anomalies they deal with. SCP-3001. This one's personal for the Foundation. Dr. Robert Scranton was one of their own. SCP-3001 is what happens when reality anchor technology malfunctions catastrophically. Scranton was testing a Scranton reality anchor, ironically named after him, when something went wrong. Instead of stabilizing local reality, it tore a hole in space-time itself. Scranton fell into what can only be described as a non-consensual reality. A pocket dimension where the Hume levels, that's how we measure reality density, read effectively 0. In our reality, Hume levels average around 1.0. In SCP-3001, they barely register at 0.1. This means the fundamental forces that hold matter together simply don't work properly. For over 5 years, Scranton transmitted logs back to our reality. We watched him slowly dissolve at the atomic level while his consciousness remained intact. His body became translucent, then invisible, then nothing, but his mind persisted in that red void. The logs start scientific and professional. By year 3, he's talking to hallucinations. By year 5, well, the transmissions are mostly just screaming. The Foundation still receives faint signals from SCP-3001. After all this time, some fragment of Scranton's consciousness endures in that place where reality forgot how to exist. They can't retrieve him. They can't even shut off the transmission. He's become part of the anomaly itself, a human consciousness trapped in mathematical impossibility. SCP-2747. Here's something that'll mess with your head. What if there were stories that could kill other stories? SCP-2747 is classified as a metafictional anomaly. It manifests as narrative inconsistencies that spread through fictional works like a virus. A character starts acting out of character. Plot holes appear. Then entire sections of the story simply vanish. Eventually, the narrative becomes so unstable it collapses entirely. But here's the really disturbing part. When SCP-2747 finishes destroying a fictional narrative, it doesn't stop there. It moves up one layer of reality and targets the author. Not kills them, erases them. They never existed in the first place. Their family forgets them. Their publishers have no record of them. The universe literally edits itself to remove any trace they were ever real. The Foundation has lost researchers to this thing. Not killed, unmade. We know they existed because of the holes they left behind. Empty offices that feel lived in. Colleagues who remember working with someone but can't recall who. Research projects missing their lead scientist. Every document about SCP-2747 is infected by its influence, including this one. The Foundation has implemented what they call narrative vaccination, deliberately introducing minor plot holes into their documentation to satisfy 2747's appetite before it targets larger narrative structures. Essentially, they're feeding it scraps to keep it from devouring everything. SCP-093. SCP-093 is why the Foundation takes extra precautions with dimensional travel. It appears as a hand-sized mirror made of a highly reflective red substance. When placed against any reflective surface, it creates a portal to alternate versions of Earth. These aren't random realities. They're specifically versions where humanity faced existential catastrophes and lost. The primary documented reality, designated Unclean Earth, shows our world approximately 50 years after a religious apocalypse. The landscape is devastated by constant acid rain. The cities stand empty except for entities called the Unclean, humans who've been transformed into something that can't properly die. Here's what makes the Unclean particularly horrifying. They retain human intelligence and memory, but their bodies have been altered to survive in the post-apocalyptic environment. They're essentially immortal, shambling through the ruins of civilization, fully aware of what they've lost but unable to do anything about it. The Foundation sends D-Class personnel through SCP-093 for exploration missions. Standard procedure requires them to wear specialized equipment that prevents them from becoming lost in the alternate reality. Several exploration teams have gone missing. The recordings they transmitted back, let's just say the Unclean, remember what it was like to be human, and they're not happy about their current situation. What's most disturbing is the implication that these realities represent possible futures for our own Earth. Every world accessible through SCP-093 shows humanity after it failed some crucial test. Makes you wonder what test we're currently taking. SCP-3143. SCP-3143 is a humanoid entity that exists as a living narrative. He's literally a detective character who stepped out of his fictional universe and into ours, bringing the narrative laws of his reality with him. When law investigates anything, reality begins conforming to dramatic structure and genre conventions. Here's how it works. Law's presence creates narrative causality. People start behaving like characters in a detective story. The suspicious person becomes the obvious suspect. The red herring gets murdered in the second act. Innocent bystanders become collateral damage. The corrupt authority figure always gets their comeuppance. The Foundation classifies him as Euclid because his effects are predictable. They follow standard genre conventions. But that predictability is what makes him dangerous. Reality shouldn't operate according to narrative logic. Our world is supposed to be chaotic and random, not dramatically satisfying. Containment involves keeping law in a specially designed facility that mimics a 1940s detective's office. They provide him with fake cases to solve, carefully constructed scenarios that satisfy his narrative requirements without affecting the outside world. Think of it as feeding him fictional problems so he doesn't turn real life into fiction. The most disturbing aspect? People trapped in law's narrative influence report feeling like they're playing a role they didn't choose. They know what's going to happen to them because it follows dramatic convention, but they can't break free from the script. Free will becomes subordinate to narrative necessity. SCP-1425, SCP-1425, titled Star Signals, appears to be a standard New Age publication about achieving cosmic consciousness through meditation and mental exercises. The Foundation classifies it as Keter class because it's a memetic hazard, meaning the information itself is dangerous. Reading the book triggers a specific neurological process that the Foundation calls enlightenment syndrome. Subjects report improved mental clarity, enhanced creativity, and a sense of cosmic connection. Sounds positive, right? Here's the catch. These improvements come at the cost of fundamental human psychology. Within weeks of completing the book, readers begin organizing into groups, practicing the described techniques collectively. They develop synchronized behavior patterns, speaking in unison during group sessions. Their brain activity begins showing impossible harmonization, individual minds networking into something larger. The final stage is what the Foundation calls stellar orientation. Subjects stop eating, stop sleeping, and develop an obsessive focus on astronomical phenomena. They begin receiving information from sources outside Earth's atmosphere, not radio signals, direct mental communication with entities existing in space. Containment involves monitoring online and physical book distribution, administering amnestics to infected individuals before they reach the final stages, and maintaining cover stories about cult deprogramming. The book continues to circulate despite the Foundation's efforts. Digital copies appear faster than they can be removed. What makes this particularly insidious is that the Enlightenment appears to be genuine. Subjects gain access to information they shouldn't possess: mathematical principles, astronomical data, technological concepts. They're becoming something posthuman, and they're completely happy about it. SCP-3008. SCP-3008 appears as a standard IKEA store from outside. Walk through those doors and you enter a retail space that extends infinitely in all directions. No walls, no ceiling, just endless furniture displays under fluorescent lighting that never dims. The entrance disappears the moment you're inside. Over 3,000 people are currently trapped, forming communities with names like Exchangeland, building settlements from furniture while searching for exits that don't exist. They've lived there for years, decades, eating Swedish meatballs of unknown origin. The real horror starts at night. That's when SCP-3008-2 entities become active. 7-foot-tall IKEA employees with unmoving smiles and stretching arms. They hunt survivors while cheerfully announcing, "The store is now closed. Please exit the building," as they literally tear people apart. What's most disturbing? Long-term survivors stop wanting to leave. They describe our finite world as too small. They're not just trapped in retail hell, they're becoming native to it, transformed by infinite consumer culture into something designed for eternal shopping.
Subscribe for more interesting stuff. Tell us your experience in the comments.